Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads. For a long awaited tier list for many of you, we are going to be ranking every single High Republic book from best to worst in this month's tier list. Before we do so, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Even though the High Republic is over, we are still going to be covering all of the new Star Wars book releases. So if you're interested in Star Wars books, this is your place for book reviews and book coverage. Make sure you let us know in the comments what your favorite High Republic books are. What are your favorites? What are your least favorites? And make sure you stay tuned for the companion video to this one, where we will be ranking all of the High Republic comic books as well. So without further ado, let's get into the tier list. And as we usually do on this channel, we go in release order. So that means we're starting with Light of the Jedi and we're going all the way to Trials of the Jedi. This is still my favorite High Republic book. I just love the way Light of the Jedi throws us into the conflict. Charles Soule really does a great job of building this world, crafting these characters, especially seeing where the arcs of certain characters like Avar and Elzar go from this book all the way to his final book with Trials of the Jedi. The Nihil are expertly handled here. I love the way he introduces Marchion Ro. I love Marchion's origin story. I love a lot of the stuff here with just setting up this world. I'm always a big fan of first books. I'm always a big fan of origins and seeing the way an author and a set of creators can build a new era, a new world in Star Wars. And that's what the High Republic was. We never had a Legends version of this era. So everything here was fresh and new. And I loved what Charles Soule did. So for me, this is still an S tier book.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in full agreement there. It is a great way to get us excited about a whole new era. Obviously, we get a lot of great Jedi perspectives, and we get to see a lot of lots of them, seeing the steps that the Republic takes to work hand in hand to really fix up the galaxy and deal with the Nile. At least this first assault by the Nile, I think is quite well done. Easy S tier. Next up, we have the first book from phase one of the junior novel series, A Test of Courage by Justina Ireland. Honestly, a pretty mature book. I was quite surprised by the level that this offered for kids and like preteen readers. It obviously introduces some pretty big fan favorites. Ernestra, obviously. Even now, it's still probably one of the better junior novels. For me, I put it in B tier.
I did as well. I put this in B tier, and it's always tough to rank junior novels with the rest of this stuff because they are a completely different reading level. Even though this is my favorite of the chapter books, I don't think it comes anywhere near the level of storytelling that's in the S and A tiers. And again, when you have a tier list, it's all subjective to what you're ranking. It doesn't mean this is getting a B, it means it's a B amongst the rest of High Republic. Next up, we have our first YA book in the High Republic, and it was Into the Dark by Claudia Gray. Claudia Gray's start here was also very, very good. It was something that really pays dividends over the course of the entire initiative. By the end of phase three, you get so much more Reef, so much more Comac. Their stories come full circle, and characters that are in this book pay off in her final book, Into the Light. Doesn't quite get to my A tier, but I would put it at the top of B.
Yeah, for me, I found Into the Light a very compelling read the first time, but just over time and with the way that a lot of the YA novels have been structured and their connections to the bigger plot events, I've kind of come down a little bit on it. I love Reed, I love Comac, I love the flashback. I also do think this is just where the Drengir peaked though, and I think that's a little bit disappointing for me. I think those factors kind of brought it down for me, so I put this at the top of B. Next up, we have the first adult novel of Wave 2 of Phase 1, The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott. Just like Liam likes his origin books, I always love the middle chapter, and The Rising Storm is a fantastic middle chapter. I mean, it is really interesting to see everything that's happening on Valo. The Republic Flare is a great setting. You get to see the Nile and especially Markion really take a huge step forward here. Yeah, I think this was the first real chance of seeing Stellan too, which I think is a big piece of that, and Lena So also gets a lot of characterization. It goes to the top of S for me.
This is an S tier as well for me. Love this book. Kevin Scott did a great job writing this. It is a great book for the Jedi. The introduction to Stellan Gios, Ty York, those characters are great. You have the perpetuation of stories from the first book with Elzar getting even more page time. My big disappointment with this book has always just been the lack of Avar. The fact that she's taken out completely for the comics was frustrating, especially in hindsight. Now looking back at her arc over time, how much of her we got in phase three books. I wish she would have been here in this story. And I do feel like the third act of this book feels more like an epilogue, more like an addendum, but it is still an S tier, and I love this book. Next up, we have Race to Crashpoint Tower by Daniel Jose Older. This was his first book in the High Republic after doing the Adventures comics. And for me, this is one that never worked that well. The gap was already huge between this and A Test of Courage, but there are so many better junior novels in this. And really, again, this is where it comes down to like talking about the High Republic only for this tier list. I don't think this is a horrible book, but for me, I put this in F tier. I think it's one of the worst books in the High Republic, and it has to go down there for me.
Yeah, for me, I put this book at the middle of my D tier. It's not great, obviously, but I do think this is probably the best connected book out of everything that we've ever read to an adult novel. Like compared to like everything else that we've read in a lot of other junior novels, it does fall flat for me. For all those reasons, definitely D tier. Next up, we have the last young adult novel of Wave 2, Phase 1, Out of the Shadows by Justina Ireland. Unfortunately, this is a bit of a disappointing book overall. I think Justina did a great job with A Test of Courage, but here she kind of starts getting lost in just the detailed characterization. I did like what she did with Vernestra, obviously, and I think she does a pretty good job with Reed Silas and Emery for sure. But like I've been harping on since this book came out, since we did a review, the way it's written feels like a whole chunk of like maybe a whole third act was basically removed from this book. It's got a very long second act that just kind of plods around, and you're like, why are we on Coruscant this long? Like, let's get to some action. I like Chancey Yarrow. I don't really like Silvestri. So for all those reasons, I put this at the bottom of my D tier.
Yeah, I put Out of the Shadows in F as well. This to me is the worst of the adult and young adult books. It is plotting. It's like the one of phase one that I never really want to return to. The middle act is incredibly long, and the characters I never connected to. And really, that is the fault of the publishing initiative on top of this book. This book doesn't put them out on a good first impression, but then we never get to see them again until Defy the Storm, which was like 3 years after this book came out. So for me, it's an F tier. Next up, we have Tempest Runner, which is the first audio drama from Cavan Scott. This led off the audio drama series, and this is another one for me that just at the end of phase one, wave two, nothing was really connecting with me when it was coming to the storytelling, bridging to the Fallen Star. And Tempest Runner's another one that I just felt was incredibly underwhelming. It's a circular story. Production value is incredibly high, as always with these audio dramas, but I felt like this story was forgettable. Lorna D just has never been one of my favorite characters. I don't really care that much about her. And at this point, a lot of the stuff is told in flashbacks in the story, and we moved on past a lot of that. So for me, this is a D tier. I do think it's a lot better than Race to Crashpoint Tower.
I actually quite like this audio drama as a whole. I think Lorna Dia has been a character that has had some very interesting changes, and why this worked for me is more because this is like taking a flat character arc and kind of having her double down on who she is while fleshing out a lot of her lore and her backstory. I would put this near the bottom of B for me. Next up, we have the final adult novel of Phase 1, Fallen Star by Claudia Gray. This is a good book, but it doesn't reach the same heights as what we got here with Light of the Jedi and The Rising Storm. It's all centered on Starlight Beacon, and that does allow for some very claustrophobic, time-sensitive chapters to occur. Avar is not a character in this book, and she gets even less time than she did in The Rising Storm. Everything to do with the Nameless, everything to do with the destruction, and everything with Elzar's arc and Stellan's arcs, fantastic stuff all around. I really did appreciate that, and I think highlights all the strengths that come with Claudia Gray writing a Star Wars book, but not having any sort of summary or recap of at least 1 or 2 POVs in the bottom half of the ship kinda takes it all the way down for me to an A, when it could have really been 3 straight S tiers for phase 1.
Yeah, I'm with you on A. This was a book that, like you said, interconnectivity is great, but sometimes when you rely entirely on plot points based in interconnectivity, it feels like it detracts from the medium that we're reading currently. The first and third acts are fantastic, though, in this. I was always disappointed with a little bit of the lack of Marchion Ro, but he's still obviously very heavily involved in the plot. He just isn't physically in the scenes. And the death of Stellan is still one of the saddest moments in the High Republic, but it's one of the best, most heroic moments. Elzar's arc is still great in this, so it's still an A tier for me. Next up, we have the final YA book of Phase 1, which is Midnight Horizon by Daniel Jose Older. It just never really works for me. This is a story that's really, though, structurally completely scattershot. It's got so many things it's trying to do at once. On the one hand, as a fan of High Republic Adventures in Phase 1, I appreciated the tie ins and the connections to that. On the other hand, it takes time to wrap up plot points that aren't involved in this story whatsoever. And the Comac and Reef stuff is good in here, but feels abrupt with their lack of characterization in Out of the Shadows. And so the fact that we've skipped them since Into the Dark and things just kind of happen really fast for their story never really set right for me. It's redeemed a little bit in the later books. I have it in D tier.
Yeah, I also have this in D tier. I put this at the top of my D tier ahead of Race to Crashpoint Tower and Out of the Shadows. Yeah, I mean, for all its flaws, I still found it fun. I did really appreciate having a more of a core world point of view with Corellia and everything that goes on there. What I really did enjoy about this is everything that happens with Wreath and Ram. I think that dynamic is really good. I especially enjoyed what goes on with Comac here. Again, Comac really does have some great dominating chapters. Like you said, it's a bit scattered. It's a bit weird having Yoda kind of just finally appear. Everything with the High Republic Adventures characters made a lot of sense to me. Everything else didn't, and had very uneven chapters as a result of that. But I still liked it enough, so, yeah, it's a D for me. Lastly, we have the final junior novel of Phase 1, Mission to Disaster by Justina Ireland, and that age level, I think, is just really good for Justina because she gets to play with not just Vernestra, but she does actually have a lot of interactions with a lot of the High Republic Adventures characters, like Lula, and she brings them up to the level that she wrote in A Test of Courage. It doesn't reach A Test of Courage, but I still enjoyed it quite a bit, so I still gave it a B tier, but more towards the bottom.
Yeah, this is towards the bottom of my B tier as well, but I agree. This is a nice payoff for A Test of Courage. I think Justina Ireland does a great job of writing this book. The characters are a little bit more mature than they were in the first one. The stakes are a lot higher, and really just seeing what's happened with Dalna from, this book through phase 2 through now phase 3 and seeing where it ends up. Dalton's just a really important planet. It has a nice arc and a nice piece of the High Republic history. As a junior novel, I think it's probably the second best one. Next up is our first young adult book from the High Republic Phase 2, and that is Path of Deceit, also by Justina Ireland, co written with Tessa Grattan. And to me, this is their best work as a team. I loved how fast paced this was. It's very short and it's to the point, and it just gets you introduced so well to the path of the open hand, the mother, Marta Ro, the new Jedi, Kevmo Zink, is also really great here. And the way it ends, just so dark and depressing. It's not a happy ending. This does a great job of starting the villain story of phase 2. So for me, this is an A tier, and I do have it rated higher than the Fallen Star.
Yeah, this is the top of my A tier for me. I absolutely enjoyed this. Kevmo and his master are very fun Jedi, but everything with Marta and the path is just phenomenal. You understand a lot more of why the Nihil eventually evolved into who they are, but this is like where there's still innocence. This is where it's still like truly about perspectives and how that can shape and shift just entire centuries worth of galactic conflict and everything. Next up, we had the first adult novel of Phase 2, and that is Convergence by Zoraida Cordova. Not my favorite book. That's the nicest way of putting it. I was a bit surprised that looking back on it, Phase 2 had a lot more emphasis on the young adult novels, actually providing the lore, providing the underlying storyline. And the adult novels, while they did have some mature themes for sure, didn't necessarily have a lot of story going on for them, at least at the start of phase 2. It's kind of bland. Like you get everything going on with Iram and Erina. Yelanatai, she becomes a much better character, but here she's emotionless. She's bland. It's only because of her interactions with Axel Greylark that I'm like, there's something potentially with her as a character. For all those reasons, I have to give this a C.
I also gave this a C. It's the very top of my C though, because have always, I think, had a little bit higher opinion of this book than you. I like this book, especially in context with like the rest of Star Wars books. This would probably be a B-ish tier for me, but I don't think it's one of the best High Republic books. And in fact, I do think it's the worst adult novel book. But Convergence, I think, does start out phase 2 pretty well. Next up, we have the first junior novel of the phase as well, and it's Quest for the Hidden City, written by George Mann. This is another solid junior novel. I put this in C purely because I think it's a little bit of a step down from A Test of Courage and Mission to Disaster, but it is still a pretty solid book. Like if you're looking for the third best junior novel, to me, this is it.
Yeah, I also have this in C tier, more towards the top for me. It's not quite as good of a junior novel as A Test of Courage or A Mission to Disaster for me, but I still thought this was a really, really solid junior novel. Next up, we have the only audio drama of Phase 2, The Battle of Jedha. Fantastic book. Honestly, I would slot this in as an essential read in Phase 2. This is not just something that you can say, "Oh, it's a whole different medium, I can kinda ignore it." It is, like, the centerpiece and arguably the crown jewel of everything that's going on from the start of A Path to Deceit all the way into A Path to Vengeance. Seeing everything that the Path does, understanding everything that's going on with all these different voice groups. I put it more towards the bottom of my A, but still definitely something to check out.
I absolutely agree. It's the last thing in my A tier, but this is an essential listen, and it is so good, especially paired with those adult novels. It introduces the characters of Creighton's son and Ada Forte, who are great in Cataclysm. A battle is perfect for audio drama already, and to have this voice cast with the epic sound effects and the music and everything's just so sweeping. It's so, so impressive. Next up, we have The High Republic Cataclysm by Lydia Kang, which is the final adult novel in The High Republic Phase 2. And this was another shocker. Phase 2 was shocker after shocker of like ones that I wasn't that excited for that ended up being great, and Cataclysm was phenomenal. The best story of Phase 2, in my opinion, and it is just epic battle after epic battle. So many great scenes, such great character payoff for characters that in Convergence that I liked but didn't love. This made characters like Axel Greylark some of my favorite characters in the entire initiative. Then you have characters like Creighton Son and Ada Forte from Battle of Jedha, who are awesome here. You have the character Charo Roy, that's awesome. Yaddle is amazing in this story. Her youngling Sippa is also amazing. This is an S tier for me. It's my third favorite High Republic book.
Yeah, I think Leah can correct so many issues that I had with Convergence just by putting way more weight on Galanati to actually deal with her emotions. She does almost unveil a whole emotional spectrum that she's been almost blocked off on. And it's not just through Axel, but through all the other Jedi that she interacts with. There's some very sad deaths that happen throughout this book, even before we reach the Night of Sorrows. It's a really, really strong book. Everything that you understand about the mother kind of comes full circle here. Everything with the Nameless is the real first experience of the Nameless, and still, as a book, so wonderful. Easy S tier behind them. Next up is the final junior novel of Phase 2, The Quest for Planet X by Tessa Gretton. It's an F tier. I think with a name like this, with how we've seen Planet X play out by the end of Phase 3, by the end of the whole High Republic initiative, it's so disappointing as you don't actually do anything about getting the planet X. For that, it is F tier for me.
I agree. F tier. This is probably the worst thing in the High Republic on the book side. Just a story that, like you said, completely forgettable. And then we round out phase two with the High Republic Path of Vengeance, the final YA book. And while I don't think this is quite as good as Path of Deceit or Cataclysm, this is still an A tier for me. I love this story. It has such great payoff for a lot of the Path of the Open Hand side of of the Star Wars The High Republic Phase 2 story. The only thing that drags it down slightly for me is the middle act. It's a little bit long. This is one of the longest YA books in the High Republic, and we have a really long middle act where we go to Planet X. And while that stuff is pretty good and it has good development for Marta herself, it does feel the most plotting out of anything in the two YA books in phase two. Nonetheless, the story is incredibly compelling. The payoff for all the characters in this is great. So, absolutely think it's an A tier. It's just towards the bottom of my A tier. I have it ahead of Battle of Jedha, but behind The Fallen Star.
I thought I really liked this book when it first came out, but it has slipped a little bit for me, unfortunately. I think Path to Deceit is just such a clean and well-written book that when you read this book, like you said, that middle act does drag a bit. And as much as I do enjoy Marta Rose's characterization and everything we get in Act 3 for her, I feel like there's a little bit of a disservice to what's happening with Yana to a degree that I was like, I want a little more out of her. You know, it's not bad by any means, but it just feels like it slipped a little bit for me over time. And and that's the reason why I put it at the top of B for me. Next up, we have Tales of Light and Life. There's some good ones for sure. I do like the Marta story. There's some very dark, twisted stuff that's happening with her psyche, but it's nothing too special, so I put it in C tier.
I put this at the very bottom of my B. I think there are enough really, really good stories in here to elevate it. As a short story anthology, we don't have any other short story anthologies in the High Republic. I think it delivers on what it needed to do. Next up, we officially kickstart the High Republic Phase 3 with the first adult novel, The Eye of Darkness by George Mann. This cover alone is one of my favorite things in the High Republic. The Eye of Darkness has been one that I have still hold up as one of the better adult novels in the initiative. It's my second favorite of phase 3. There are a lot of really exciting, gripping moments in this. I loved the Elzar Mann stuff. I love the Avar Kriss stuff. I love the Porter Angle stuff. Really love the Porter Angle stuff. Marchion here is awesome too. For me, it's an A tier.
This book is also the second highest thing that I have in A tier. I'm a fan of this. George Mann kinda goes on a superstar run throughout phase 3. There's some really excellent twists, especially everything with the storm wall, the whole planning about it. I do like the beginnings of, like, what's going on with Elzar and Avar too. Avar's got a great story in general. All around a great book. It doesn't reach the height of, like, the very best of the High Republic for me because I do think it kinda does have some bigness about some of its details, but I still think this is exactly a nice palate cleanser for everybody after phase 2. Next up is Escape from Valo. This is where I think Daniel Jose Older actually shine. This feels like you really are seeing characters like Ram really take a first real step forward. I will admit I have a real soft spot for Keldo, Tip Tip, and Gabby. I think they all go through some pretty fantastic journeys overall. Bridget too, I think she has some pretty interesting reasoning. It takes a while to kind of pay off for her character here. It's not something you typically see between Jedi younglings too. So I thought there were some really interesting things and Daniel plotted out, but then having Ram kind of be your connective tissue from phase 1, seeing his maturity, the connections to the comics. Because of those reasons, it is more towards the bottom of B for me. But I think it's just because he found a fantastic cast of characters and did a good enough story and kind of fallout for everything from Valo that I really did appreciate.
Yeah, you and I see it a little bit differently on this one. I actually have this in my D tier. I just found this incredibly long. I do agree, cast of characters solid, and I'm glad Kildo and Tep Tep at least continue throughout the entirety of the junior novels in phase 3. The thing for me with this story was I found it a little bit too YA-ish, but kind of dumbed down for junior novels. So on top of the length, it really goes for just the kind of classic traditional crush story. There's a lot of melodrama in this, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And for me, I'm not a big fan of melodrama already, but then to, have it at a kid's level, I just don't think this was something for me and written for me. Next up, we have Defy the Storm, the YA book from Tessa Grattan and Justina Ireland. This is their second YA book and the first YA book of phase 3. Unfortunately, this is not nearly as good to me as their first one in phase 2 was with Path of Deceit. So I have it in D tier. It's a book that's not horrible though. And again, I want to reiterate, just because something's in D tier doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's not as good for the High Republic. And Defy the Storm has some redeeming moments. Like I think the second half is actually quite good. It does introduce the Blight in a more permanent role into the story of phase 3. And Vernestra gets some good characterization. Emery gets some good characterization. There's some payoff for the characters you've been interested in. The thing about this book, though, is it spends almost the entire first act catching you up with characters who personally I didn't even really like from Out of the Shadows, characters I completely forgot existed. It's at the very top of my D tier.
Yeah, I'm a bit more positive on this book, but I think it's mostly because I appreciated it actually doing a good amount of work to undo some of the issues that I had with Out of the Shadows. I do appreciate the characters kind of getting a little bit more maturity. I do love Ernestra's journey in this. I think it's quite solid. I don't love, but understand the beginning of the book kind of being a bit of a recap of everything that's going on in the Eye of Darkness. I can't say I love this book, right? Because it has a lot of severe flaws to me, but I will say I personally enjoyed a lot of the arcs of the characters overall in the end, and I think someone like Avon Staros, like with how personal this conflict has become by the time of phase 3, her journey and some of the darker elements that she faced at least kept me like very interested throughout this book. That's why I put it more towards the top of C. Next up, we have the second adult novel of phase 3, Temptation of the Force by Tessa Grattan. I did appreciate that while this is still a romance novel at its heart, it doesn't really try to be like end all be all. There still is plot elements that are moving around it. What weighs it down from taking another level up to like an A tier for me is the issues around like some of the plot that happens. Like everything with the Battle of Naboo, it feels way too short. I was very disappointed by that. I do have to give this more of a top of B.
Yeah, this is at the top of my B tier, and I have a lot of the same reasons. I think it's a book that has a hard time reining in its focus, but when it does, it can be great. when it focuses on Avar and Elzar, that's top tier stuff. And while I was a little mixed overall when we first read it on like, okay, how is this going to play out? Now, having read Trials, I think this does a great job of continuing to set them up for their overall outcome. Somebody like Vernestra has a lot of time to shine and is actually a really compelling part of an adult novel for the first and really only time. Buryaga really takes a big step forward in the story, and I really appreciated his appearances. For me, this is a top of B, but we followed it up with Tears of the Nameless by George Mann. And this one was fantastic. This was a great return to form for YA, which had really been struggling to find a truly great output since Path of Deceit. And really, in the phase one, phase three story, never had its true magnum opus until Tears of the Nameless. And this is a fantastic story, great characters, a great return to Reith and Comac, who have been sorely missing for a long time. And we get a great start to their story, which progresses into the final two books, progresses into some of the comics, and George Mann really delivers here. This doesn't quite get to my S tier, but it's the very top of A. I think this is a fantastic book.
I have this a little bit lower, but again, it's just because I found some other experiences a little bit more fulfilling for me. You take all the evolution of Reed from that, from Out of the Shadows, everything with Comac here. I liked the fact that the Child of the Storm concept. I really like that. And there is some very tragic deaths too in this book. It's kind of shocking with some of the stuff that happens here. And obviously Aslan Ro, he is fascinating. It is a bottom of A for me, but again, still a fascinating book, and it's a really huge step up in phase 3 for the YA books. Next up, we have Beware the Nameless, the second junior novel of phase 3. I like it. I just don't love it. I like it because there is a lot of continuation from Escape from Valo, but this book could have dropped a lot lower for me. Like how you said with Escape from Valo, it felt a little boring for me, but this book could have still dropped even lower for me. But star character of this book is True the Hut. Absolutely love that perspective. Absolutely love a hut that's not the stereotypical hut. Because I didn't find it as entertaining for me as Escape from Valor, I put this as a bottom of C.
I'm with you that it's at the bottom of my C, but I did find it significantly more entertaining personally than Escape from Valo. This is what I like my junior novels to be: fast paced, fun, interesting, exciting stories. You know, as an adult reader, there are levels to these stories. I like the cast of characters, like the perpetuation of Kildo and Tep Tep. They learn some good lessons. For me, this is a bottom of C, but I still think this is a pretty solid junior novel. Next up, we have the Audible original Seeds of Starlight and Haunted Starlight. These are both by George Mann, and they continue with the cast of characters from the junior novel series. So that's why they feel kind of junior novel esque. They're also a little bit shorter. Overall, I liked both of these as well, kind of in that same vein of Beware the Nameless. These are stories that didn't blow me away, but I think the core values, the core simple story, plus you have the Drengir involved with these stories as well. It explains how they get out, how the Great Progenitor gets out of Starlight Beacon and then into where we see her again and into the light. But overall, they are a little forgettable and not necessarily the greatest stories in the world. For me, they're still C tier.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same feelings. Again, this is a weirdish book to rank because it's not a book, it's Audible exclusive. While I do like the character of Cam, just love the continuity of having Kildo and Tep Tep there. See the Starlight, it's okay. Like I think it plays it fairly safe, but I liked Haunted Starlight a lot more because it actually played with like what can a Drengir be, what is going on with the Great Progenitor as a concept more so. Caesar Starlight came to me more at the bottom of C, versus Haunted Starlight came in into the middle of C. Next up, we have the audio drama Tempest Breaker, still about Lorna D, but I did like that this is fairly important. If you've read the Marvel Phase 3 comics and then read this, and then all the pieces of this are then directly picked up in Fear of the Jedi, it almost kind of becomes essential. Where it kind of comes a little bit down to earth for me is everything with Avar and Kiev. There is some interesting stuff there, but it does play a little bit more like it does in phase one. There's a lot here for Kiev that I think is super important too. I just found it pretty shocking that it all is in here and not really repeated that heavily in Fear of the Jedi after this. But overall, I did like what they did with Lorna. I think the scene with her and Marchion added some pretty interesting world building for like what it's like to kind of kiss up to Marchion Ro and the Nile in general. So for those reasons, I put this as a B.
Yeah, I have this as a C, and just purely because, again, not a huge Lorna D person or a huge fan of this story in general. I think biggest flaws with Tempest Breaker are just purely structurally the way it connects to only comics. Like if you're somebody, and this again goes back to a big complaint I just had throughout the entirety of High Republic, if you're somebody who's just listening to audiobooks or you're just reading and you decide to listen to this, you'll be completely lost unless you've read the comics. Like there are things that just you need to have known about Phase Three's comics to get into this, or at least be familiar with some of the characters from Phase One comics. Like you said, there are some recaps, but I think this is a story that just is so insulated by the comics that it just kind of like feels like this weird side note when we're talking about the rest of the books. That being said, I do think this one's significantly better than Tempest Runner because we read everything. I sometimes try to balance that perspective versus the perspective of somebody who might know nothing, and I don't think this is something you can read at all if you know nothing about the High Republic Marvel comics. If you do, this is still a pretty enjoyable experience. The production value is incredibly high as always, and I do like Lorna's arc here much more than I do in Tempest Runner. Some really good payoff as well for characters like Skier and like Keeve as well. And the way Avar ties back into the story, I thought was pretty good compared to how I didn't really love her appearances in the comics originally. For me, for the High Republic, I have it at the very top of C. Next up, we have Into the Light by Claudia Gray. This is the final YA book, and this one was honestly slightly disappointing. Claudia's traditional style, the way she is so good at breaking down character and really getting into the minds of these characters and returning to these characters who she originally wrote, does leave for a lot of really exciting, memorable character moments in this. My big disappointment was just the fact the story doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's not something that's even really referenced at all in Trials of the Jedi. And because Trials takes a lot of the main characters from this story and continues with them, the ultimate outcomes for some of the characters here don't really have the impact they should have for the final book in YA, especially with something as impactful for the overall narrative, like Tears of the Nameless was in the previous YA book. But overall, the package here, I still think, is a pretty solid, good story. Reef is still great here. Comac is still great here. Aslan is still great here. Aslan has some really, really cool scenes. And the Drengir, you get some wrap up to as well. And like you were mentioning, Haunted Starlight, Seas of Starlight have that transition. Here we get the finale for the Drengir. I'd still put this in B tier.
Yeah, I thought this was a solid book. Like you said, it's not super impactful. It gets recapped in like 3 sentences basically in Trials of the Jedi, which kinda sucks because if there was a little bit more weight to the Drengir as a whole in Phase 3, I think we would have heard a lot more about them. Nan is here, and I think she's good, but I just wish that there was a little bit more weight to what's going on here. Like, I would say Dr. M'Baka had a little bit more going on with her and what she was trying to achieve, but it's been a while since we've really followed her, basically since Defy the Storms. The stuff they did with Aslan was actually quite fascinating, like what Kashyyyk was doing to almost heal him and push him towards the light versus what we see him in Trials of the Jedi and what Planet X is doing to him. And for that reason, I kind of leave in the middle of B. Next up, we have the final book of the junior novels, and this is A Valiant Vow by Justina Ireland. I like this too, but I didn't love it. It actually is a bit lower for me than Beware the Nameless. This is really great for Tep Tep and her evolution. Imri has become a fascinating character from not just his initial experiences in the Test of Courage, kind of becoming this Jedi philosopher of sorts. I just don't think the villains of the story are all that interesting to me. I put this at the bottom of C for me.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said, except I have this in D. I just thought this was kind of an underwhelming finish to the junior novels. While I appreciated the way Phase 3 decides to wrap up with the three authors in their mediums that kickstarted the whole thing, this is just not nearly as good as her other two, really, in any way, shape, or form. It's a pretty underwhelming, short, flat story, in my opinion. Here, returning to Emery should have felt a lot bigger, a lot more grand, a lot more fun. And I would have loved if Fernestra was a little more part of this story as well. But Where the Nameless, personally, for me, is significantly better. So I had it in D tier. And finally, the last book of the High Republic and the last book of Phase 3 is Charles Soule's Trials of the Jedi. It's a fantastic finale and one that I think delivers on everything it sets out to deliver on. My biggest complaint with this has just purely been an initiative complaint. I think they bit off more than they can chew. They had too many characters, too many things going on. Not everything is wrapped up by the time Trials ends. The things and the characters Trials picks to focus on. It does all of them extremely, extremely well, whether it's a short chapter with Porter Engle taking down Vise, whether it's the end of Avar and Elzar, whether it's the end of the Blight and the Nameless, the end of Marchion Ro, all of that stuff is just phenomenal. The end of Wreath and Aslan. This book is longer, but the pace is electric. It has so much exciting material in it, and so many things happen that you just keep flipping chapters. And whether one faction is in a slower story, the next faction is doing something really exciting. For me right now, I think I'm going to put it at the bottom of my S. This is my fourth favorite High Republic book.
Yeah, I have it in the same position. At one point, I do think I had it a bit above Cataclysm, but it has slightly slipped a little bit. My only real critique of this is the interludes. I don't think they were super necessary at this stage of the High Republic. Everything with Planet X is fantastic. I love how quickly we jump onto it. It pays off everything in Temptation the Forest. I mean, Elzar and Avar, they fully get to become who they are, who they were meant to be. I love everything with the Nameless, and there are some very strange chapters with the Nameless on Planet X, but they're super cool. Marchion finally getting a little bit more clarity on his depiction throughout Phase 3, where he's kind of been like a ghost, like a wanderer. Here you understand why. Love seeing all the characters like Belle and Buryaga. I mean, even Ty York has some really cool stuff there. Charles could have stuffed this book a little bit more, and I wouldn't have complained. I honestly would have been fine with another 100 pages, and I'm super glad and thankful for that. So, bottom of mess for me.
Well, we have our tier list, but we're going to reconvene right now and discuss the final rankings, and we'll be right back with the final rankings of the tier list. This is our final tier list for you all, our joint tier list. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you check out my tier list right here. This is how I would rank everything individually. It's what I referenced throughout the video. And then Sonic was referencing his tier list throughout the video, and this is how he would rank everything. Let us know which ranking you agree with more, or do you agree with our joint ranking? Let us know your rankings in the comments below. We do always attach these tier lists to the video description, so if you want to do it yourself, you can do it and share it with us on social media, or even post it now. You can post things in our community, post it in our community, and share your rankings with us. Make sure you like the video. If you haven't, subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you guys all next time.